I know you're scared and you want to go home. I'll take you home soon. It's just that I gotta be upstairs for a while. Something's come up.
What?
Never mind. What?
Someone's coming. I'll scream. If someone's upstairs, they'll hear me.
With the door shut, no one can hear anything down here. I soundproofed it myself. So shout if you like, you won't bother anyone.
If you try to touch me, I'll scratch your face. And whoever's coming will see and ask why.
This face?
Hello, you're listening to Find Your Film After Dark. My name's Eric, and I'm here with Bruce Purkey. And today, we're going to talk about the movie, The Black Phone, and the Joe Hill book, or short story, The Black Phone, and kind of compare and contrast the two. I think we talked a little bit about the movie on the podcast, but we didn't really get into it too much, I don't think. So we'll do a little bit of that, but this is mostly going to be spoilers, so that when you talk about a movie and compare it to the book, you kind of got to talk about some things. Now, the book, real quick, is a short story from a compilation called 20th Century Ghosts by Joe Hill, Stephen King's son. I could be wrong. I think The Black Phone originally appeared in like something else. I can't remember what Wikipedia said. Since the movie's out, you can probably go to a bookstore and then just look. It probably says The Black Phone, and it's like a full-size book, but it's going to have a bunch of short stories in it because The Black Phone is quite short. I listened to the audiobook, and I don't know that it's an official audiobook. I think it's just someone on YouTube, a woman on YouTube, just reading it on her YouTube channel, and it's about like, it's less than an hour. It's like 50 minutes or so. And I gotta say, she's got a pretty good voice for the book, so it's very enjoyable listening to her read it. There's a setup. We'll move it on to Bruce, so I'm not talking all the time. But I guess let's start off with what'd you think of the movie?
Yeah, so I like the movie quite a bit. I think we both like the movie quite a bit. We talked about it in general terms and recommended it on the podcast a couple weeks ago. As we're speaking, I think it's either mostly out of the theater or almost out of the theater. But I saw recently a little news report or something coming up that it's going to be streaming either video on demand or maybe even on a service soon. So this will still work for people to probably, hopefully, if nothing else, hop on board when it's available to rent. Video streaming. Definitely, I think we'd both agree it's worth it for that. It's really fun to see in the theater, honestly, but that may not be an option at the point that you hear this, or it may be almost not an option. So hop on that if you can. I also listened to the same version of the short story on YouTube that you did, so I have the exact same context. I didn't look up where this was published as a short story first. My guess is if it was like the history of Stephen King, I'm wondering if it was published in a magazine of some sort or possibly an online forum of some sort, maybe.
It shows on the Wikipedia when it's got the list of the all the books in 20th Century Ghosts. To the right of that, it shows where it was first published, and it's like the third something. I can't remember, the third paper or the third. I should probably just look this thing up because I'm going to be kicking myself. But go ahead, I'll look this up real quick.
So while he looks that up, I mean, the basic concept, if for people who've obviously watched it, or if you haven't watched it, in the movie at least, you have a character called the Grabber who is kidnapping and murdering children. And our main character, Finney, is the newest captee of this guy, and he's stuck in this basement. And that's kind of the basis of both the short story and the movie. And we'll talk a little bit about the differences in it. In the short story, we kind of have a big chunk of the movie is the short story, but then the movie expands on that universe, I would say, a fair amount. Whereas the short story is essentially the Finney character, the Grabber character, and a couple of things surrounding that, and how he will or won't escape the clutches of this, evil killer, and what's his predicament and how it's going to play out from that point.
I just looked it up. It came out in 2004, the third alternative, number 39. I'm assuming that means like the 39th edition or whatever. But to your point about the movie versus book, yeah, everything in the short story is in the movie. And like you say, it just expands on it. I think that's why I like the movie better, because I did enjoy the short story. Like one of the main major differences was the sister character. She was mentioned in this story, but she actually had a character, like a full fleshed out character in this. And, like, she was like the second lead pretty much, or third
Yeah.
lead. The cops looking for him. The stuff that goes on out, like in the short story, mostly seems to just take place in the basement, where the movie kind of expands past that. And then, oh, where'd he go? The cops are looking for him. She's got some dream connection. I think they mentioned a dream connection in the short story. I can't remember.
What I remember in the short story, and correct me too if I'm wrong on here, is in the short story you essentially have a scene that is played out in the movie, but that's about all we have of her, which is her riding around these neighborhoods
Yeah.
trying to see if she can sense where he's at. And I think it's during that sequence in the short story that we essentially get these really quick snippets of all of the boys who have died so far.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not like them communicating necessarily. It's just like what happened, like a brief glimpses of who they were and what happened to them and how they disappeared, so that when we do get contact later in the story, we kind of have a context for that. And we also have the idea that people are out looking for him and that there's this kind of connection with his sister. But you're right, in the movie, and I think a lot of people have agreed, even people who didn't like the movie as much as I think both you and I did, a lot of people have really commented on how much they like the little sister character. And she is really, yeah, like you said, she's like a third lead. Really, the relationship between the two of them and the way they both manifest these powers and the way they both are kind of dealing with levels of abuse and violence in the outside world is kind of key to the movie version of this,
Yeah.
I think.
One of the things of the movie that worried me, that didn't really get me hyped to watch it, was the mask. Because it looked like it
Mhm.
was just the excuse for Ethan Hawke to like mug in the mask, like, ooh, look how crazy I am. Actually, I think the most iconic thing in the movie, other than the mask and probably the phone, is the van. Because Scott Derrickson did a really great job of always having that van in the background. Kids walk in, and then you just see no context, just that van creeping in the background. It's like, ooh, something's going on. And then they had the kid doesn't get captured right away, so like, there's other kids, and they kind of lean in on that. This is a good example of, usually when someone adapts a story, they'll add things to it that are kind of superficial. I think all the stuff they added to this like really expanded the world, created a sense of dread, really did a great job of it feels like the time that's set in. I live in Colorado now. I didn't grow up in Colorado in the 70s. I was in Omaha. It had a feel of the time, and they did a real good job with the setting up the Ethan Hawke's character, the grabber character. So when he does
Yes.
finally show up, the danger is like palpable. You can punch right through it if you wanted to.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it does. I was going to mention a few things about that too. I agree absolutely. What it does is a couple things. It shows you, first of all, that the whole town is kind of on edge. And I think what it does is this is what does the opposite of Stranger Things in a lot of ways. And Stranger Things has its own kind of pluses and minuses, but Stranger Things like heavily just builds these really obvious member berries throughout, right? And I think this did a better job of kind of creating a sense of a time and place. Like you said, you weren't in Colorado then, but we have that kind of 70s serial killers are around and ever present in the society at that time. And they are like kind of the boogeyman for people in general. I mean, I lived in the Northwest when they had the Green River Killer and Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
At the time, it was just kind of this thing, like there could be a weirdo around the corner. And I think that is really well set up. And then I think the other thing that I had mentioned before is this sets up a world that is violent towards them. Every place that they go is unsafe. So it almost makes it does a weird thing. It almost makes the killer in some degrees less unique for their lives, but it almost accentuates the danger, because you've already seen how dangerous just their ordinary lives are. So you're wondering, what the hell is this guy going to do?
Yeah. Another thing was kind of creepy is the fact that they introduce his brother.
Yep.
They don't introduce his brother as his brother right away. He's just some guy who's like, yeah, we're looking for a killer. And he's like, oh, yeah, me too. Come on in. Let me show you all. Like, and they're like,
Yes.
what about that? They point to the cocaine. He's like, oh, yeah, no, I don't have to worry about that. But the idea that then later on they show that they're living together, and he's got this kid locked, like he's actively searching for the killer and kind of a crazy guy.
The grabber?
No, the conspiracy theory He's got kind
Oh
of a
yeah.
conspiracy theory kind of bent to him. He's
He's kind of
looking.
got drug-fueled paranoia combined with conspiracy theories, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. But it's happening right under his nose.
right.
And
So
even that little kind of detail is just adds that little extra creepiness. It's like you think you're safe in your house, you could have like a kid chained up in your basement and have no idea. Like,
yeah, and that works two ways because that works really well as far as like the whole like dangers everywhere and you might be paranoid, but I also could be right, you know, that kind of thing. And
yeah.
the other way it works is there's like at least two, and I think this is one of them, two things that are kind of hearkening slightly to Silence of the Lambs. And I think it's not the basement part, but the part in Silence of the Lambs where I guess we're double spoiling things, where you
Oh,
think
we're
at the
spoiling the shit out of
yeah,
it.
where you think
If
it
you haven't seen it or read it, just move on.
where you think they found Buffalo Bill and they bust in on that house and they bust in and it's there and you don't and the movie is misdirecting you so that until they bust in and it's not the right house, you don't understand till that moment that oh shit, Starling's at the right house and they're at the wrong house. And this does that kind of twice because it shows you, you know, them going to his house, the correct house. They find the brother. They don't know they have the correct house, and they leave. So that's a little Silence of the Lambs, and also a little Jeffrey Dahmer. Right, there's that whole thing with Jeffrey Dahmer where they had them and they give the kid back to him. That was kind of horrible. And then the second thing is at the end of this movie where they are busting into the house and you think they're busting into the right house and are actually busting into the house across the street, which is just where he keeps the bodies. And that was a really nice little
Yeah.
misdirect too, as well.
Actually, that was kind of a weird one. Just like this, the weird thing is I can buy that someone lives in the house with that going on and not know what's going on.
Right.
But for some reason, like that he would buy a house across the street. Like, how dense is his brother?
Yeah, I kind of wondered about that too. I think that was probably the most hard for me to get rid of was the brother not having any clue. And I think the idea is they're trying to tell us that he hasn't been there the whole time.
Well, not even
Yeah.
that he doesn't have a clue. Like, I get that he doesn't, I just don't go in the basement. Like, there's
Right.
there's parts of my house I don't go into because like May's room, I don't need to go in there. For all I know, she could be, having sick dogs in there, like just keeping them barely alive. That's dark, and I'm not going to go into that anymore. But I mean, that's a
Okay.
very real thing that could
Very specific thought, but go ahead.
that could be a thing that's happening. I would have no idea. I think my sister owning a house across the street or next door, that's a tough thing to keep from people.
Right.
But it's also a story about a phone that with dead kids that
Right.
dead victims. So you
Well,
kind of let stuff like that go.
as a writer, though, you could think they could easily get away with it by saying something like, "That's a house that's been vacant and uninhabited for a year,
Yeah.
years or two." They could do
Also,
something
it's
like
the
that.
70s. You
And
can
just
get away with a lot of stuff like back in
Yeah.
the day that you can't get away with today.
Well, that's true too. But I mean, you could have kind of explained it away in another way that would be a little more plausible. Maybe you still have to have a little bit of suspension of disbelief, but a little less. Now, the one other thing, but we probably should talk about though, the biggest difference, I think, other than what we've already talked about, would be the amount of contact he has with the different dead kids. I think that's a pretty big difference between the short story and the movie. Did you not agree?
So I remember the grabber or the main character, the kid.
The main character, the
Yeah.
kids. I think in the
Yeah, because as I recall in the story, the previous kids that were kidnapped are brought up, kind of
Right.
almost like a news flash or impact. Old Timmy got taken a week ago, and that's pretty much. But like in this, they actually have at least he has relationships with one kid in particular. Actually, a couple of them. The one was a bully to him, and he got taken. He's like, "Fuck him, good job."
Right.
Which if you're a kid, you probably do that. If you're an adult, you'd be a dickhead for saying that, no matter how big the dick a kid is. But yeah, I mean, this is who was the writers on this? I know Scott Derrickson directed it.
Well, Joe Hill, of course, Scott Derrickson, and C. Robert Cargill.
Okay, this movie I think is pretty much textbook on if you're going to adapt something, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
Because they didn't add, let's give them a dog. Why? Because, audiences like dogs. It's like, okay, we're just going to like all the stuff they added to the story, expanded on it, made it better. They added stuff that help the characters, help you feel for the characters and understand the characters. And that's not usually a thing Hollywood movies do with adaptations. And so that I really wanted to put a point on that because I think this movie does that really well.
I agree. And also, I think what it does, what we've mentioned a couple times, is that if you have a short story, which is obviously very focused and is presenting this kind of this tone and this version of a world, this movie basically goes, well, what does the town of that world look like? You know, and how does the town kind of, or I don't know, accentuate or represent all of those things that you're seeing kind of crystallized in that little room, which I think that is what it does as well, too. It all
Yeah.
seems tonally and metaphorically and thematically consistent, I think, to the short story.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like they learned all the right lessons from Summer of Sam.
yeah, yeah, yeah. and then, and then, remind me if I'm wrong about this, but in the short story, he essentially gets mostly contacted by the one boy, the baseball kid, which I think is Bruce. Am I right?
Yeah.
Is it my? I think it is Bruce. Yeah, and he gets
You would know.
yeah, and I think he gets told like how to, you know, pack the phone with dirt and all this stuff, and
Yeah.
that's like his final clue to how to kill the grabber. But I like how in the movie, and then some people probably don't like this, but I actually really liked it. To me, it added a whole level to that escape, and that was how each kid kind of contacts him with a different piece of information, and most of them fail as individual ways of escaping, but they all end up creating this giant like unknown complex set of situations so that when he does have to actually go after the grabber, like all the pieces are in place from the different kids.
Yeah.
So this kind of becomes this almost Rube Goldberg sort of trap that he's created without knowing it. And I think
Yeah.
some people will probably find that kind of corny. I really dug it. I really enjoyed it.
I think the only thing I thought was corny was pretty much everything about the mask, but especially at the end where he pulls the mask off and then even the hawk starts flipping out like, oh, my mask. I was like, that's kind of, I didn't feel all the things this movie did right. That was the one thing that just seemed
Yeah.
like a trope that wasn't really earned. But
I agree.
I
I
guess
agree.
in 20th Century Ghost, one of the short stories is My Father's Mask. And I didn't read that one yet, but it sounds like it might be a prequel of sorts to the
I don't
Black
know.
Phone. I don't know if it might not be a prequel at all. I just read the little synopsis they had on it. If it's what I think it is, it sounds like, fuck, I shouldn't even talk about it. Just what I suspect it is maybe why that mask means something to him. Or maybe it's just like kind of like a Fargo and A Simple Plan, where they're kind of sequels, but not really. You know, maybe it's one of those things, or maybe something entirely different. And I'm talking out of my ass, which I completely am.
And I don't know the answer to that, but I know that as I was watching the movie and the mask thing was coming up, I wish it would have. I can mostly read it as the way I thought it was, but the thing you're talking about at the end goes against that. I wish it would gone with what I considered the whole way around was, which was basically he used the mask as a dual thing, like a way to kind of scare the kid
Yeah.
and to keep changing it to kind of scare the kid, but also to show kind of where he was at. I'm in my happy mode. I'm gonna put on my happy face, or I'm mad, or I'm, you know, kind of in a weird schizophrenic spot, so I'm gonna have half my mask on or whatever. But I didn't think it seemed consistent that he would, if it came off of his face, he would go crazy, like, oh no, you can't see me, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I think
they didn't really set that up.
I saw it as
Really
more
at
as
all.
a messed up tool for him. And I think that works better in the story too, because you see him constantly doing that sort of thing where he's doing these things like, hey, I'm going to leave the door open, you know, and you know that's a trap, or hey, I'm giving you food. Well, is there something in it? No, why would I need to do that? I've got you. You know, there's a lot of little things where he's
Yeah.
like, okay, I was going to let you go, but now I'm not. Things where he's toying with the kids' emotions and expectations. And I think the mask works better as that
But
sort of thing.
basically setting him up to be gaslit so he can
Yeah.
oh well, now I gotta kill you because you tried to escape. I'm like, you literally told me to.
Well, yeah, because this is, I mean, these things are always about control, right?
Yeah.
And it's usually a person who's out of control in some other way, or they feel like they were out of control and now they're using this as a way to control and own another person and kind of work out these terrible, like, damaged thoughts. So it makes sense to be that mask to be that sort of a thing as well. Like you said, just being a spooky yuki, or oh, don't look at me, I'll melt. You know, that kind of thing. That kind of thing doesn't make any sense. So
We talked on the regular podcast about just Scott Derrickson in general. I'm not like a huge fan. I'm trying to think. I don't think I've hated a movie of his, but I haven't really loved one like I do
yeah,
with this one. I don't know. Maybe this is like a Frank Darabont Stephen King thing, where like maybe
hmm
Scott Derrickson just gets Joe Hill. and maybe they should maybe Scott Derrickson should go through the rest of the 20th Century Ghosts, and or more likely maybe this was just a book that spoke, or a story that spoke to him specifically, and maybe should just move on to other things. But that I got a real sense of inspiration here. I think that like you should probably listen to the audiobook of the short story or read it, and you'll probably get like a little more out of it. Not much, because again, all this is in the movie. This is like a rare case where I think the movie's better than the source material,
I
but
agree.
like
I agree.
by a lot, and that's something special, because you don't say that often.
Well, to me, the short story is kind of like we talk about with his earlier films. The short story is fine, but it
Yeah.
doesn't blow me away. But this movie is really good. I kind of wonder, and this is probably impossible to figure out, but I wonder what the effect of making these small films and then making this really big film, with the Doctor Strange movie, and then coming back to this. I wonder if, I don't know what that does to you as a filmmaker, where he now knows he can do this big tentpole, crowd pleasing, giant, mega, multi-billion or $1 million movie, and then to be able to go like maybe almost release all of that. Once again, I'm just totally projecting this, but release all of that pressure, filmmaking pressure of, am I good enough? Am I skilled enough? Whereas he can just focus on the material and actually really just hone in on making a really great movie, and not, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you kind of get what I'm getting at? Like,
Yeah. I
because,
also think with this, it has to do, because like Sinister and Deliver Us from Evil and Doctor Strange, like the stories there, like as Anderson says, those movies are in one eye out the other. Like
yeah,
the stories aren't there. I don't.
right.
As soon as I left the theater, I was like, yeah, I think I saw that. That it just didn't stick with me. This one has like the atmosphere. It's good. The story's super simple. And so since the story's so simple, you got to lean on the characters, which they do, and you have to lean on the atmosphere, which they do. And from what I recall, like the Sinister and Deliver Us from Evil got a little too overly complicated. Maybe not, but it feels like it just kind of got a little too full of itself. And then with Doctor Strange, it's a Marvel thing, so it's well, not punching, because that's not a Doctor Strange move, but this one just felt like they were focused in. We're gonna tell this story. We're eyes on the prize, and we talk about that sometimes. When people just tell completely simple story and just focus on making that story the best they possibly can without adding a bunch of unnecessary frills to it.
I agree. I do still think there's some mysterious secret something going on here. I don't know if it's a
Yeah.
combination of he and the other writers and the material and the actors, bringing Ethan Hawke back in after Sinister. Because if what is the mysterious part to me about why this movie works is that you could imagine almost the exact same script totally not working.
Yeah.
Like those scenes where the kids are communicating with him could be absolutely ridiculously silly, and somehow they really work. For me, they really work, at
Yeah.
least. So there is something to like the tone and the way it's shot and the way it's directed and the way it's edited that is working really well in a special way, above and beyond just a simple story told. It's like how they're telling it, right? Like
Yeah.
this story could be told with almost, I say, identically the same script and be probably nearly at least half as good. you
Yeah.
know.
Although I
So
think with the script that they had, I haven't read
it's
the
pretty
script,
good.
but
It's pretty good.
but I mean, I haven't read the actual script, so I don't know.
Right.
I assume it's in here because it's in the movie. But I think one of the best things they did with it was they spent some time with the previous victims.
Yeah.
Because normally in a movie like this, it's the victims are just faceless kids. I miss mommy.
Right.
Where's daddy? I don't know. Oh, kids in peril. This isn't that. This is, now we know these kids. These are actual characters now. And now we know, we grow to hate them, love them. The bully, fuck him. The baseball kid, oh, he's nice. That sucks that he died. We actually have stakes in the kids that are already dead. And then so when hearing the main character talk to him, and then his reactions towards him, because we know what what his relationship is to him. Dude, Hollywood, take notes for fuck's sake.
You reminded me when you said that. That was one difference from the movie and the short story that I really love too. So we go through and we get all these different communications with the kids, and they keep telling him like, try to do this, try to do this, and he keeps trying to escape or set up different things. And then there's the one towards the end where he talks to the kid, and then we get the girl having the vision of that kid in the past and getting into the car with the kid, and then hearing the phone call from the other side. And I thought that was really cool and a totally neat little twist. Nothing that was in the story whatsoever. It's something that didn't have to be in this movie, but it gave you at a point in the movie where you were kind of getting that pattern. It gave you a switch up of the pattern, plus that extra connection with the sister that I thought was really nifty and really cool.
Yeah. I think like going forward, if like and who is the writer again? So you got Joe Hill, Scott Derrickson, and
C. Robert Cargill.
C. Robert Cargill. I'd like to see him do not another Black Phone, but just like let's just get something super simple. Let's just meat and potatoes, and let's go for something like this again, because this is the kind of stuff that really works for me. And
I wonder because they've been a team for a while. I wonder what his deal or what the director's deal is now. Like, does he have to make a big one to get the funding to do a little one like this, or is it one of those kind of?
I wouldn't imagine, because I think this movie did pretty well. It's Blumhouse, and Jason Blum usually says, "Here's $5 million. Go make your movie. Sounds good. Here's $5 million." Like, why wouldn't? Hey, here's another Joe Hill adaptation from Scott Derrickson. Here's another $5 million. Just go make it.
Yeah, and just like you said, start becoming a kind of a team up that becomes successful. Because if they can make these modestly budgeted pictures like this kind of movie is going to always make a profit. Like even if it doesn't do great in the theater, this is the kind of movie that people will rent or watch, like having a Friday night or a Saturday night, hang out. Because it's like it's not your super disturbing Hereditary kind of horror. This is pretty meat and potatoes. This is pretty mainstream. I mean, it's creepy and scary and effective, but average mom and pop America could watch this movie.
And also, like, from a producer standpoint, not that I'm a producer, but from what I understand, $5 million is nothing. Like, especially if you have like if this team's going to be making movies, at the $5 million range, and they become known for they got a new one coming out, I'm checking it out. That $5 million, just keep that budget, and make 50-70 million in the box office. Like, dude, that's like one of the best business plans ever, because people are going to go see it, because it's like, these are the people that make these movies, and they're constantly good.
Yeah, you make 3 or 4 of these, it'll become you'll get that solid like reputation.
Yeah,
people are going to know.
It'd be like an A24 thing. You're not going to make an A24 movie for $100 million, because you're going to lose your ass on it. But making an A24 movie for like $2 million, between $2 and $5 million, people are going to watch it just because it's A24. It's known for quality.
Yep.
To a certain group of people. Some people are like, they're full of themselves. Well, okay, whatever.
Well, but that's I mean, if you're making lower budget movies and they have a reputation to your audience that's big enough, that's all you need. If you make a really good quality action movie and you have a good quality action star and a team up that continues to make those for 5-7 million, whatever, and you can make back your 30 or 40 million on each of them, you don't have to appeal to everybody. You have to appeal to that hardcore action audience, or whatever that audience is, romance or teen dramas or whatever you got. So
and this is talking out your ass with Eric and Bruce.
Yeah, we're just making shit up, aren't we? Hey, studio producers, we totally know what we're talking about.
But yeah, this is a really fantastic movie. Just like a really good. I hope a bunch of people that need to watch this movie and get the right lessons from it, because I think there's a lot of good ones here. Just in terms of adapting source material.
And I hope a lot of people give this movie a chance, because I think a lot of people, you have to give them all those warnings ahead of time, like, oh, that's a horror movie, or it's gory, or it's really, extreme, or whatever it is, which is understandable. You have to do that for some people, but I think this is one of those movies you don't have to do that with. You can say, you can watch this movie and it's going to be a good, scary, creepy, fun time.
Biggest lesson, adapt short stories.
Yeah.
Because they're usually short and they're usually not long enough to make a feature length, but there's usually like little diamonds that you can kind of mine to kind of expand little bits and pieces and further explore the bits of the short story, provided that's in the short story.
You do these Lords of the Rings, you're gonna have to make these like 4-hour movies to try to make it, and it's still gonna miss something. Even as much as you love Dune, like they're having to do it like 2 movies for one book, and even then it'll probably miss some giant subplot. You're right, like you take a short story that's really simple, you can make a very rich meal out of those ingredients.
And Harlan Ellison has hundreds of them. Just throwing that out there.
There's so many out there. Even like that's why like a lot of times you see great movies made out of a short film.
Yeah.
Like people start with a short film and they're like, that's a really great short film. That could become a bigger universe. And a lot of times those work out really well. Not always. Sometimes they just take the short film and just stretch it out. But yeah.
So Ralph Bakshi, if you're listening to this, adapt I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, please. Actually, Phil Tippett, he nailed it with Mad God.
Don't take 30 years. You're getting up there, dude.
Yeah. But anyway, I think that's about it. Unless you got anything else to add?
No, I think that's it. Go out and listen or read the Black Phone and then watch the movie.
Yes. And you can also find our merch, such as these wonderful pint glasses and t-shirts, on findyourfilms.com.